So I think the World Development Report talks about three things, and I'm not going to summarize the report, but it talks about, social protection, human capital, and mobilizing revenue as a response to the changing nature of work. So in India, I think we have challenges on all fronts. Human capital, because obviously even if we have people who are qualified, they're not sufficiently qualified. If you look at the information technology sector, they're pretty much retraining 1.5 million people every year to make them ready for their workforce. If you look at any manufacturing organization, automobile, steel, cement, there is some degree of retraining happening. So therefore, people are not job ready, or not more job ready than perhaps they were. The second part is to say that how do you create the revenue to actually support the rest of the poorest of the poor, as you mentioned, and I'll come back to private sector in a moment. To me, it's not clear to me, if you look at the current situation, where that money will come from. You know that we are in a situation where we have a shortfall on goods and service tax collections. Income tax may be good, but next year may be down because the economy may not do so well. So we're not exactly sitting on surpluses. I mean, there is a war going on between the government and the Reserve Bank of India only because one is looking for money from the other. So all of this suggests to me that we are not exactly sitting on pots of cash to distribute beyond a point. And particularly if you are saying that we want to take care of tens of millions of people or hundreds of millions of people going forward, then we need to have the money to do that. Other countries are obviously looking at ways of increasing taxation, changing the tax structure so as to make sure that people don't escape by going to tax havens and so on. But that's a completely different kind of problem. We don't have that. So we have to address it at a different level. So I think, if you ask me, I think the nature of jobs, as a financial journalist and therefore maybe more capitalist, the nature of jobs the nature of jobs question has to be addressed and perhaps resolved best by the private sector. Now, how it's going to be done is a long discussion, but suffice to say that a lot of companies are already beginning to do it because they themselves are facing pressure. If you look at companies in the IT services sector, for instance, all of them are making sure that their workforce, and we're talking about millions of people, are ready for this artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital world, and have already begun investing in it. So they have no choice but to do it. But the issue is, how do you then incentivize the private sector to make sure that it creates more future jobs, make sure that it enters industries which are, let's say, the future industries. So I was reading in the same report that India has 4 million app developers. Now, I'm not sure the number is accurate, but if it is, then it's a huge number, right? So going forward, I think we have to put our emphasis, at least from my point of view, on how entrepreneurs, enterprises, and the private sector at large can better respond to the challenge of creating jobs, of reskilling jobs, and making India as a country and its workforce completely future ready. And to my mind, it's the private sector that can best deliver it, and therefore the private sector must be incentivized in the best way possible to do that. So, governments are governments. I mean, and we've always had governments, and it's like no government can produce a miracle or a rabbit out of a hat. So my expectations in that sense are far more measured and calibrated. Has this government, the current one, tried to do something? Of course it has. There's no doubt about it. It's tried to do a Skill India or put more emphasis on skills. It's tried to do Startup India. It's tried to do Make in India. It's tried to get people in. But yes, these things are not something in a globalized economy you can decide and drive on your own, because enterprises need capital, enterprises need markets, enterprises need access to markets. All of that is a function of things beyond your control. What I mean, when I say beyond your control, I mean the government's control. So to that extent, full marks to the government for trying, but the problem and the nature of the problem, including the larger one about the shifting of jobs and the nature of work, is something much bigger than maybe most governments across the world can get their hands around, including us. So that's one part. Second is, on the social side, yes, I mean, health and education are the foundational, most foundational aspects of any country, including in India. If we fix health, education and gender alongside that, or health and gender and education and gender, we fix most of our problems. So to that extent, is the government doing the right thing with Ayushman Bharat? Yes, it is trying to make sure that people don't go into poverty because they've had an illness in the family or a big illness and go out of the workforce and disappear. So an Ayushman Bharat or any attempt to provide some sort of net or insurance to people at a conceptual level is a very good idea and is totally commendable. I think any such such large project in this country because we've never had such large projects, and we've had very few examples to look at even from globally. We'll always falter. But the trick is to say that, okay, how can I quickly learn from those mistakes, if mistakes, or missteps, and then quickly correct? I think I would expect Ayushman Bharat to sort of progress, to make mistakes, to falter, but hopefully learn very quickly and make sure that it reaches the 500 million target that it's supposed to reach.